Samuel Slater, 1768 to 1835. Samuel Slater's life. Samuel Slater was born on June 9, 1768 in Derbyshire, England. Slater worked as an apprentice at 14 years old at a cotton mill and worked his way up to a superintendent position. He became interested in the mill technology designs of Richard Arkwright, which he brought with him when he immigrated to the U.S. in 1789. Coming to America. Since it was illegal in England for a person who worked with textiles to leave the country or to share technological information, he had to lay low for a while to get out of England. Shortly after arriving in America, he went straight to New York and got a job for the New York Manufacturing Company using the English designs he had memorized to give him an advantage in the workplace. Samuel Slater's mill. Samuel Slater built his first American water-powered cotton spinning mill in Pawtucket, Rhode Island with the help of a Quaker merchant. He had it running by the end of 1790. He quickly attracted workers, for he was becoming very popular and allowed families to live and work at the mill site. He and his brother then built a small town to accommodate the large number of people that lived there. Slatersville was built in 1803 by Samuel and his brother John in Rhode Island. It was a small town with the common necessities and nothing more than that. In Slatersville was the Slatersville Mill, which was the largest and most modern industrial building in its day. Slatersville was later restored by industrialist and preservationist Henry P. Kendall. In his mills, Samuel Slater first employed children to work there from the ages of 7 to 12 years old. They worked long hours in the mill for less than $1 a week in extremely unhealthy conditions. During that time period, families were extremely poor and children were rarely enrolled in school. Children during that time period stayed at home to help their parents, which usually involved farm work. So when children went to work at the mills, the conditions were pretty much the same, so it was acceptable to work there.
The Industrial Revolution came to America mainly through two instances of what today would be called industrial espionage, or industrial spying. The spying occurred because the designs of English textile machines were carefully guarded secrets. They had brought England so much wealth that laws prohibited shipping the machines out of the country for fear that people might copy them. The first case of industrial spying took place sometime in the 1780s, when a man who had been employed at an English spinning factory named Samuel Slater memorized every detail of how the machines were built. He moved to the United States the year George Washington was elected president and had copies made of the English machines. Then he opened up a cotton spinning mill in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and put them to work. And by the beginning of the 19th century, 100 workers, mostly women and children aged 7 to 14, could be found laboring here at Slater's mill. The second case of espionage that brought the Industrial Revolution to America produced copies of English power looms which were first employed in the United States in the year 1814. Like the design of the spinning machine, the design of the power loom had been secretly memorized from English machines. And once America had power looms, it rapidly became an important textile manufacturing nation.
The death of Samuel Slater. Samuel Slater had accomplished his dream of building the textile industry in America and had turned it into a family business. Samuel Slater became sick in the 1830s and was bedridden from rheumatism 3 years later. Near the end of his life, after President Jackson had conferred with Slater, he declared him to be the father of American manufacturers. His glory days didn't last long, for he died in the mill village of Webster, Massachusetts 2 years later. Samuel Slater's contribution to the mill system. Samuel Slater not only created the milling industry in America, but improved the system used by the English. He introduced a family labor system where duties were divided according to age and gender. Men worked as laborers or skilled artisans, women cleaned raw cotton, and children worked on the mill. His wife, Hannah Wilkinson Slater, invented cotton sewing thread, which was a huge improvement over the sewing thread, which helped create machines that outdid any other invention.
In these decades, the country also witnesses the emergence of a new generation of entrepreneurs, daring, imaginative, and occasionally ruthless.
Many of the very earliest industrialists had made their money in trade of various kinds. One of the best examples of this is the earliest mechanized textile mills in the United States, Samuel Slater's Brown and Almay Company in Rhode Island. Moses Brown had become a Quaker, and he wanted to find something better to do with his money than the slave trade. Now, cotton cloth is not totally removed from slave labor, but it's at least a few more steps comfortably removed. Other kinds of merchants would pool their money or would come together and invest in corporations. You do find banks willing to float loans by the 1820s, say, but usually it's people who made money in trade and then got interested in producing the goods that would enable them to trade on a much larger scale.
Patterns of ownership in manufacturing vary to some extent from region to region. For example, in Philadelphia textile manufacturing, there is a much higher degree of ownership of relatively small mills by individual proprietors or partnerships rather than by these nascent corporate organizations. And some economic historians have suggested that that actually made for a more flexible ability to adapt in hard times than larger operations in New England. But a good deal of manufacturing, as we would understand it, still takes place in very small shops, often under the supervision of owner workers who have grown up from being people skilled in the trade and have hired workers in to assist them. The average size of workforce in a manufacturing establishment, taking the United States as a whole, is something like 9. It's still very small.
The numbers may seem small, but recruiting a labor force is a major challenge in the early years of the factory system.